Byford Dolphin Incident. On November 5, 1983, a group of highly trained commercial divers were working on a drilling rig called the Byford Dolphin in the North Sea. Because they were working at extreme depths, the divers lived inside a pressurized chamber on the surface, which kept their bodies at the same pressure as the deep ocean so they wouldn't have to decompress after every single shift. 2 divers were resting in one chamber, while 2 others were in a diving bell that had just been brought back up to the surface and connected to the main chamber. Outside, a tender was responsible for safely uncoupling the bell. The standard procedure was strict. The doors had to be locked and the pressure perfectly equalized before the clamp was released. But for a reason that is still debated today, the tender opened the clamp while the inner door to the pressurized chamber was still open. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. The pressure inside the chamber dropped from 9 atmospheres to 1 atmosphere in a fraction of a second. This caused an explosive decompression so violent that the air rushed out of the chamber with the force of a bomb, killing the tender outside and all 4 divers inside instantly. But what actually happened to their bodies is horrifying. For 3 of the divers, the sudden drop in pressure caused the gases dissolved in their blood to instantly turn into massive bubbles. Their blood literally boiled, and the fat in their bodies immediately precipitated out of their blood vessels. But for the diver standing closest to the door, the physics of the event were even more brutal. The pressure difference violently forced his entire body through a crescent-shaped opening that was only 24 inches long. He was completely shredded, with his internal organs being ejected from his body and scattered up to 30 feet away across the deck of the rig. The entire event happened in milliseconds, meaning their brains didn't even have the time to register pain before they died. Harrison Okene. It was May 2013, and Harrison Okene was working as a cook on the Jascon 4, a tugboat operating off the coast of Nigeria. At 4:30 in the morning, the ocean was incredibly rough, and a massive wave suddenly hit the boat, causing it to capsize and begin sinking rapidly. Harrison, who was in the bathroom at the time, was plunged into absolute darkness as the cold ocean water rushed in. He managed to force his way out of the bathroom and scrambled into the officer's cabin as the boat settled at the bottom of the ocean, 100 feet below the surface. Miraculously, as the boat flipped, a pocket of air was trapped inside the cabin. Harrison was alive, but his nightmare had just begun. He was trapped in a 4-foot-high air pocket, waist deep in freezing water, dressed only in his underwear. For the next 3 days, Harrison lived in complete, suffocating darkness. He had nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and no idea if anyone was coming for him. The psychological torture was unimaginable. As the hours ticked by, the oxygen level in the air pocket slowly decreased, and the deadly carbon dioxide levels began to rise, making it harder and harder to breathe. To make matters worse, he could hear the terrifying sounds of sharks and barracudas swimming through the flooded hallways of the boat, eating the bodies of his 11 crewmates who had drowned in the wreck. By the 3rd day, he had accepted that he was going to die. But then he heard a hammering sound on the hull. A team of South African rescue divers had been sent down to recover the bodies of the crew. When one of the divers swam into the hallway near the cabin, Harrison reached out his hand through the dark water and tapped the diver on the shoulder. The diver was absolutely terrified, thinking he had just touched a corpse, but then Harrison grabbed his hand. When the diver surfaced in the air pocket, the rescue team couldn't believe what they were seeing. But saving him wasn't as simple as just swimming to the surface. Because Harrison had been breathing compressed air at a depth of 100 feet for nearly 60 hours, his body had absorbed lethal amounts of nitrogen. If they brought him straight up, the nitrogen bubbles would expand in his blood and kill him instantly. They had to fit him with a diving helmet, bring him to a diving bell, and put him in a decompression chamber for another 2 full days before he could finally return to the surface. He was the sole survivor of the Jascon 4. Kursk submarine disaster. On August 12, 2000, the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk was participating in a massive naval exercise in the Barents Sea. With 118 crew members on board, it was one of the most advanced and heavily armed submarines in the world. As they were preparing to fire a practice torpedo, a faulty weld on one of the torpedoes leaked highly volatile hydrogen peroxide. The chemical reacted with the metal inside the torpedo tube, causing a massive explosion that instantly destroyed the front two compartments of the submarine and killed the men inside them. The submarine plummeted to the ocean floor, 350 feet down, but the nightmare wasn't over. The fire from the first explosion quickly spread to the other torpedoes, and 2 minutes later, a second, much larger explosion ripped through the hull. This blast was so powerful, it registered as a 4.2 magnitude earthquake on seismographs across Europe. Most of the crew died instantly, but 23 men in the rear compartments of the submarine miraculously survived the blasts. Led by Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov, the men sealed themselves inside Compartment 9, a small section at the very back of the sub. They were plunged into total darkness as the power failed, and the temperature quickly dropped to near freezing. They waited for a rescue that would never come. Kolesnikov wrote a haunting note in the dark, stating, "It is dark here to write, but I'll try by feel. It seems like there are no chances, 10 to 20%. Let's hope that at least someone will read this. Here's the list of personnel from the other sections, who are now in the 9th and will attempt to get out. Regards to everybody. No need to despair." As the days passed, the oxygen in the compartment began to run out. To survive, the men had to use chemical oxygen-generating cartridges, but because they were operating in the pitch black and the compartment was slowly flooding with seawater, someone accidentally dropped one of the cartridges into the oily water. The chemical reaction caused a sudden flash fire. The fire consumed the last remaining oxygen in the compartment and produced a lethal amount of carbon monoxide. The 23 survivors suffocated shortly after. Due to governmental secrecy and delays, it took days for international rescue teams to be allowed to help. And by the time Norwegian and British divers finally opened the rear hatch more than a week later, they found that everyone inside was already dead. OceanGate Titan Submersible. This is a terrifying example of what extreme deep-sea pressure can do to modern engineering. In June 2023, the Titan Submersible, operated by OceanGate, descended toward the wreck of the Titanic, which sits at an incredible depth of 12,500 feet. At that depth, the weight of the ocean above creates a pressure of around 400 atmospheres, or roughly 5,800 pounds of force per square inch. Imagine the weight of a full-grown elephant pressing down on every single square inch of your body. The Titan was uniquely constructed, using a carbon fiber cylinder bolted to 2 titanium hemispheres. However, carbon fiber is known to weaken over time when repeatedly subjected to extreme compression. On June 18th, about an hour and 45 minutes into the dive, the carbon fiber hull finally failed. What happened next is called a catastrophic implosion, and the physics behind it are mind-bending. Because of the immense pressure, the hull collapsed inward at speeds exceeding 1,500 miles per hour. The entire structure of the submersible was crushed into a twisted pile of debris in about 1 millisecond. To put that into perspective, it takes the human brain about 13 to 100 milliseconds to process visual information, and even longer to process the sensation of pain. This means the implosion happened so fast that the 5 people inside never even knew there was a problem. They went from being completely alive to completely destroyed before their brains could even register a loud noise. Furthermore, as the immense pressure instantly compressed the air inside the cabin, the air underwent a process called adiabatic compression. This is the exact same process that ignites fuel inside a diesel engine. In a fraction of a millisecond, the air inside the sub was compressed so violently that its temperature skyrocketed to several thousand degrees, hotter than the surface of the sun. The passengers were simultaneously incinerated by a flash of superheated air and crushed by the sheer weight of the ocean, effectively vaporizing them in the blink of an eye. It is considered one of the most painless, yet existentially terrifying ways a human being could possibly die.